Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. A warning to our listeners, some of the topics discussed in this podcast may be disturbing. If you need support, please contact your local crisis line or helpline. And if you're in Hong Kong and you'd like to call the Samaritans hotline, you can call them on 2896 0000. I'd just like to take a moment to tell you about a book that I've written. It's a memoir called Fool Me Twice. And it's a story about my life with a focus on my journey internet dating, where I was scammed and injured in the process. It's an educational book that will help many other people not to get caught in the same trap that I was. I'd like to also take this opportunity to play my book promo for you. Here it is.
From life on a farm in rural Australia, where wide open spaces made a young woman yearn to know what was beyond her country town. She moved to the city, became a mother, and found her dream career which took her across the world. But still, something's missing. In her search for love, she traveled far, trusted deeply. She wanted so badly to find someone that she almost lost herself in the process, and learned some hard lessons along the way. Fool Me Twice, a new memoir by Jules Hannaford. Available August 20th on Amazon.
Today I'm here with Siufung Law. Thank you so much for meeting me today, Suifung. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah, it's my honor to be here as well.
Siufung, where were you born?
I was born in Hong Kong, so I'm a local Hong Konger.
What was your childhood like?
It's a long story, but I guess my childhood is typical childhood. So I'm the eldest in the family, so I also have two younger sisters. And my parents are both working. And then we are quite typical Hong Kong family that a lot of times we're raised by our domestic helpers. So sometimes you are more close with your domestic helpers than with your parents because your parents have to go to work every day. But during the weekends, my family and I would always go to the park and we will enjoy our time. Yeah, during weekends as well. So I would say my childhood is a typical one. You know, it's not particularly special, but it's nothing very dramatic as well.
What was school like for you? Did you feel like you fitted in when you were in primary school?
In fact, during my primary school, I didn't really think too much about issues like gender or sexuality. For example, my primary school life was a typical one. We're just having fun. Well, in Hong Kong, you have to go for all these academic results.
Yes.
So I study hard for my, academic and also doing different kinds of stuff. Like I played violin when I was in primary school. Yeah.
Oh,
and,
did you?
Yes. I played for 4 years. And then afterwards I stopped. Because in high school, you have so many different other things that you can do. So, yeah. And so I would say my primary school life is a typical one. It's more like the high school. During high school, I have more exposure to different kinds of things, in particular in relation to my sexuality and gender identity. And that was the period of time that I feel like I didn't fit in very well.
At what age did you start to question your sexuality and gender in high school?
I think it was about when I was 14. It happened because I realized that I was attracted to a girl in my class, basically. And at the very beginning, I didn't know that it was kind of wrong or abnormal. So I just knew that, okay, I'm attracted to this person. And she is talented, she's bright, she's pretty, and that's it. And not until like people start to tell me that it's wrong to be in love with a girl because you are a girl.
Okay.
And that is the moment that I knew the terms about like homosexuality, and I started to know that it is not normal. But before that, I didn't really know it. And before I knew that I was attracted to women, I didn't really know that there were like different kinds of sexuality as well.
I think many people, when they're young, they're just not aware of these things. And I think it's important to point out to our listeners that you were born female and then you had this attraction to a girl, and it was seen as not normal in those times. Of course, in our society today, we understand that it's perfectly normal and that people are born in particular genders or sexuality, and that's just who they are, and there's nothing abnormal about it. But I imagine when you were young and being Chinese as well, it was seen as not normal, particularly in your culture. Is that correct?
Yes. In particular, like I have a family, like my father and also my aunt are teachers and principals. They are now like principals and vice principals of some of the high schools in Hong Kong. And you come from this kind of more educational family, like conservative towards gender and sexuality. Of course, like my father was actually the vice principal of my own high school during my time. So,
oh, was he? Oh,
yes.
So he was at the same school.
Yes, at the same school. So I bet he has already seen a lot of like girls being more tomboyish, because I started to get more tomboyish, I think around 15 or 16 after I know about my sexuality. So at that time, I thought I was a lesbian because I was what people told you. If you are biologically born as a female and then you're attracted to women, then you must be a lesbian. So during that time, we only have that kind of like options. So I get to be more tomboyish, more boyish, more masculine. And my father has seen a lot, but then he didn't really like it when it comes to his daughter. There was a lot of like suppression as well. So you try not to be so, a lot of times you have to suppress your sexuality, your understanding of gender, not only to your father, but also to, friends in your school, because you never know who would tell your parents or father, right?
Did your parents have any idea about your gender and sexuality issues at that age?
They question a lot. So sometimes they will ask me questions about that. And of course, obviously they were not happy about my preference. And during that time, my father would get very stressed because of my sexuality. And I understand that because like he has pressure not only from himself, but also from people around him, and people gossip about all these things. During my high school time, it was quite repressed, my sexuality, and try not to influence. I don't want to, have bad influence on my father and also on my younger sister, who was also at my own school.
Oh, right.
Yes.
How did your sister respond to your sexuality at that time?
At that time, she didn't like it because it caused her a lot of attention. People had a lot of attention of me, and because of her as well. And she was that kind of low profile person.
Yeah.
She wanted to be invisible in school, especially you have a father who is already a vice principal, and you have an elder sister who is so loud and out in her terms, right? Is loud and out, and she didn't like it at the very beginning. But I would say right now she's very supportive to my choice.
Oh, that's brilliant. So when you were feeling that you were a lesbian as a teenager, you tried to repress it in one way, but then you just said you were loud and you were out. So were you also embracing being a lesbian as well at the same time?
I would say I embraced my body and my own sexuality outside school. So I was quite active within the lesbian community, or in general, the LGBT community, or more specifically during my time would be partying. Yeah, during, we go to all sorts of lesbian parties, or sometimes the gay and lesbian parties. At that time, it's very rebellious. You don't want to go home, basically. So you do all sorts of things that, teenagers do.
Yeah.
So I think for me, at that time, we started to have all these online internet forums. I think in Hong Kong, we also have like several, one or two online forums that are specifically for lesbians, right? They would discuss about all sorts of things. And then sometimes you would post pictures, to ask for a girlfriend or something like that. So I also did that, stupid things.
Oh, that's cool.
Quite out in that sense.
Okay, but not at school or in front of your family.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Just for our listeners, you now consider yourself to be genderqueer. Is that correct? Can you explain to me what that means?
Genderqueer are people who do not identify themselves within the gender binary of male or female. academically, because I'm also like a more academic person, academically, genderqueer could be under the umbrella term of transgender. But, some people would also say that transgender people are more like crossing from one sex to another gender. Genderqueer are more like ambiguous or more fluid in terms of their understanding of gender identity. For me, I would say there are different types of genderqueer. So some people would say I'm happy feeling both female and male. Some would say I'm either male or female at certain point of time. For me, I would embrace the definition or the understanding of genderqueer as neither male nor female. So I don't put in myself into the binary of, this gender binary of male or female. For me, I am biologically female, legally female. I'm socially male almost most of the time. But I'm also, competing as a female athlete.
Right. So we'll get to that in a minute. But I just want to go back to then your childhood. So you were experimenting with being a lesbian and you're identifying with being a lesbian. But then you started to obviously question your gender. When did that happen and how did that come about?
I think it was like at around 14, people told me that I'm a lesbian because I'm attracted to girls. But eventually I realized that I'm also attracted to guys. Interesting. I never really think of myself as bisexual in any period of time. I don't really know why, but maybe because like bisexuality is not very common. I mean, it's not very visible. But then when I started to realize that I'm attracted to guys, I wanted to be seen as a guy attracted by a guy. So it was kind of this gay relationship that I was like fantasizing during that time around like 16, 17. At that time, I had a girlfriend at around 18. And that girlfriend, she was a lot more mature than me. And then she has been actively engaging in the LGBT community, not only in Hong Kong, but also in the United States. Eventually, like one day, she actually asked me if I feel like I am a transgender person.
Did you know this term when she asked you?
No, at that time, I was quite, I don't know, what is transgender? And then she started to explain that to me. And then we go online, Google it. And then later on, like she brought me books, a lot of times like autobiographies, and also sometimes historical, books on transgender people. So I started to know about all this transgender. And when I knew about it, we don't even have a Chinese term on transgender. It was later on.
What's the Chinese term now for transgender?
They call it 跨性別.
And what does that translate to in English?
The first word 跨 is more like cross. 性別 is gender.
Oh, okay.
So it's a literal translation.
But there was no Chinese word when you were learning about being transgender.
They have some terms, but the terms are more negative.
Right. Yes.
More like transsexuals rather than transgender. So transsexuals are people who are usually undergoing surgical alternations, like bodily alternations. For example, they will take hormones, they will do surgeries to become the other gender. So, but transgender is a more broader term because like some of the transgender people, they would not desire surgeries or full surgeries.
Right.
So there's a difference between transsexuals, but at that time we only have this Chinese term on transsexuals.
Right.
Not transgender.
I understand. Okay. When your girlfriend told you about the term transgender, did you identify with that? Did you feel that it could be you or?
Yeah, at the beginning, I was quite curious about the term. And I never really thought, I know I'm more masculine in that sense, in a lesbian relationship, but I never really think of myself as a man at that time. It's not a possibility. Although I fantasize, having a gay relationship with some men.
As a man?
Yeah, as a man. Yeah, and I thought it was just a fantasy. But when I knew more about the diversity of sexuality within the transgender community, for example, if you are a female to male, that means you are transitioning from female to male. You could be attracted to a guy, a woman, or another transgender person. I only knew that, during at 18, 19, that, gender identity and sexuality were two different things. And it was quite very fascinating because like schools never really teach us about that at all.
It's so important, isn't it, that young people learn that gender and sexuality are continuums and that we can fit anywhere on them and that they're completely unrelated.
Yes, exactly. Because a lot of times you can see, even within like lesbian or gay relationship, you always ask who is the man, who is the woman, or who is the top and the bottom, right?
Yeah.
So it's still this kind of very binary kind of understanding of relationships. It was very eye-opening when I knew that, transgender people, their gender identity and sexuality are actually different things. It actually fulfilled my fantasy. So if I wanted to be treated as a guy and I could be attracted to a guy and being seen as a guy, at that time it was astonishing for me. So I think it took me quite a while before I really identified myself as a transgender man. So for a period of time, like during my university life, I had been struggling because like during high school, because of my father didn't really like me doing a lot of sports. So I didn't really engage in sports. So I was like that kind of poetry person, literature person. Well, it was a very good thing as well. So I still write poetries, not that much, because I was quite repressed in doing sports during high school. I actually did sports crazily in my university life.
Oh, right. And is that where you discovered bodybuilding? Because just for our listeners again, you are a quite famous bodybuilder and you're a genderqueer bodybuilder. So can you explain what that means?
Well, genderqueer is a kind of identity, right? Gender identity. So bodybuilder, of course, like you work on the body, and then I'm a professional bodybuilder right now. So basically it means that you're a professional, in bodybuilding. When I did bodybuilding, it was after my undergrad degree. But then my passion towards sports started in my university time. And at the very beginning, I was still identifying myself. I was struggling between being a transgender man and a masculine woman. I had this struggle as well because like I knew that if you want to be a transgender man, most of the people would, choose to do a surgery or something like that. And I never really want surgery. I actually questioned a lot whether I was really a transgender person. And there was no other terms as well, no other categories of things that I could identify myself with.
You hadn't found the words gender fluid, gender queer, gender non-binary. Okay.
Yeah, it was. I think the whole trend about gender non-binary only comes up like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
It's not something that I knew it during my university time.
How old you are or how long ago you were in university?
9 years ago.
Okay, so you're around 27.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm 28 now.
28.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
During my university times, I was struggling between being a transgender man. And then towards the end of my university, I came out as a transgender man because I thought that was closest to my understanding of my gender identity. Although I don't really feel very fit in, but still it was something that is more, better than being a lesbian.
Right.
Yeah.
You felt more aligned with that
more
at
aligned
that time.
At that.
Right.
Yeah. Especially I'm very masculine or muscular like body figures. Well, a lot of girls also want to be more fit, but not having this very
masculine body. Yeah, you're very muscly.
Yeah, so it's different. So for a year or so, I identified myself as a transgender person and also started my research in the university. So I was in the graduate school in the university. So I was researching transgender studies as well. And during the research, I start to meet a lot of people because you have to meet a lot of people and you have to talk to people and you have to study things. And that is when I discovered like genderqueer and gender non-binary as another option or as something that is more applicable to or more aligned, as you said, to my own understanding of gender.
Right. That's so cool. Did you reveal all of this to your family and how did they respond if you did?
I never really come out to my family in terms of my gender or sexuality. But in these few years of around like 4 or 5 years ago, when I brought my girlfriend home, then they started to accept that I'm attracted to women. So they're okay with it. And I think they kind of treat me as a lesbian, more masculine. I'm more the masculine kind within the lesbian spectrum. I didn't really come out as a transgender person or a genderqueer, but I know that they know about it because I have been onto so many different media reports and stuff.
Yes, I was going to say, they must have read something about it.
They must have. They have already read something. My mom recently told me that, I actually look into your Instagram. I never really, because my parents are not into Facebook, anything at all.
Oh, that's handy. Yeah.
Yeah, never on Facebook, never on Instagram. So she told me, I read some of the stuff on your Instagram and stuff and then we accept who you are. Like that's recently how my mother told me. We always support you. Like,
that's great. How did that feel?
Relieving.
Yeah, I'm sure. Very relieving.
Yeah, but still, I still try to protect my family, especially because my father is a principal of a high school. So there are like a lot of like more conservative kind of schools, right? So try not to have bad influence or bad impact on him. So I never really talk so much about my family in my report or in my media or not exposing the names and stuff. So try to
protect them. That makes sense.
Yeah, I don't really want my own pursuit on whatever or my advocacy will actually have bad influence, especially in Asia and in Hong Kong, where not a lot of people still are very understanding about all these things. And a lot of times it's parents don't understand it, right?
Yeah,
it's not the
that's
school
true.
itself. So I don't want to add on pressure on my family and stuff.
Why do you think culturally in Chinese culture there isn't quite this sort of open conversation about sexuality and gender? Why do you think that's the case?
I think even on sex education, we don't really, most conventional schools, at least during my time, I didn't really have a proper sex education. Not to say, something that the society consider as different, right? I came from an all-girls school, and then we don't really have formal sex education.
My understanding is that local schools mostly still don't have sex education in Hong Kong, but the international schools do.
I think so. International schools are much better on this aspect. And in particular, a lot of international schools also work on gender and sexuality as a kind of topic, right?
Yeah.
In local schools, like mostly they do not have it. At least during my time, we never had a proper sex education. A sex education is like giving you all these tampons and stuff. Yeah, apart from that,
That's what I remember mine, and I'm way older than you, but there wasn't much more than that.
How to deal with menstruation and stuff.
Yeah, and that's
apart from that, for women, you don't really you have to say no when it's no. And that's it. And
that's all, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think you would have benefited from having more knowledge when you're a teenager? Would that have helped you on an emotional or social or physical level?
Of course. I feel like if during puberty, if you are being exposed to differences of different people, the different kinds of gender identity and sexuality, you're never alone. You're never the abnormal one. It's just different. So I think if we have more this kind of education in high school, gender, sexual minorities, not only in Hong Kong, but elsewhere, constitute 30% of LGBTI people, commit suicide or attempt commit suicide, right?
I know, it's sad, isn't it? That's just too many people.
Yes. So it's like 3 out of 10, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times it's because they feel alone, they feel different, or in more negative terms, they feel deviant. Right. And then the society tells them that you are abnormal, you are bad or whatever, right? Or with all these negative labels. And I think if we learn it properly in high school, when most of us were struggling with our identity and stuff, it would actually help a lot.
Understanding diversity and acceptance and being kind and generous and not judgmental about anybody is a message that all young people should get in schools, regardless of sexuality and gender, just in general.
Yes, exactly. And then we are more flexible and more fluid than we think we are. In my own story, I jumped from a lesbian to a transgender man and to identify myself as more genderqueer, more gender fluid. Well, it's also a process, right? So I always think that, and I always say that, we are always in the continuous process of becoming. So there is no one particular point that you have to restrain yourself, or, there's no one kind of sexuality or gender that you need to put yourself into a certain box.
That's exactly right. You can be evolving, and we're always experimenting with our identity, and we can always grow and change, all of us. And I think that's what people have to remember. And it's not up to other people to label you. It's up to you to choose your own labels. Isn't that true? Like, you can decide your sexuality and your gender identity. Nobody else can decide that for you.
And all you can do is to respect someone's choice, right? And I think that's the most important thing.
Absolutely. It's so important. And were you bullied? Did you have any experiences with being bullied as a young person or even as an adult in your 20s?
I think during my puberty or in my high school, I was quite lucky. It's also because of my father.
You had protection.
Yeah. I kind of of course, classmates during earlier times, they still they bully you because you are your father's daughter. So not really bullying you, but then they isolate you because they don't want to be friends with you. They're afraid that if they're friends with me, then people will say that, they want to get some benefits or whatsoever. I think that was that kind of bullying rather than because of my sexuality or gender. I'm quite lucky, I would say, because of the protection of my father, maybe. I never get really bullied in school. In fact, I was quite famous during my high school. So I had a lot of fans.
Did you? Why?
I don't know why. Usually they would worship all these sporty girls. I'm not a sporty girl in my high school. I was the cute type, they would say. I don't really consider myself as cute, but that was what people called me during that time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I was I enjoyed the benefits of being
quite popular and
being popular
cool.
and
cool. That's nice.
And yeah, so I think I'm quite lucky on this term. I think I won't say bullying, but people are always misunderstanding about my gender identity or my gender expression. Like in these few years in particular, I can feel it because when I engage more in bodybuilding and also when I go to like changing rooms, a lot of times people would mistake me as biologically man. And because I go to female changing rooms most of the time, a lot of misunderstanding always happens there.
Right. And do you get challenged about, hey, you're in the wrong room or anything
like that? Of course, I always get that, right? People would stare at you and people would, ask you questions. And a lot of times, nowadays are better. Like at the very beginning when I was in a chain store gym, in which like most of those women are normative women in their middle age. A lot of times they don't expose to all these like differences.
Yes.
And they don't have the knowledge of it at all. So yeah, they would be quite challenging to talk to because I encountered one of the more extreme case. The woman was actually like challenging. She challenged me because like she said, I told her that I'm a woman and stuff. And she said, no, you're not. And then she said, because my breast is too manly. It doesn't look like a woman's breast.
Did she say that?
Yeah, she said that.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was wearing a sports bra and also shorts and stuff. And she was claiming that my chest is a manly chest. And then we start to argue on that point. So how do you call a woman's, how big should it be for a woman's breast, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing is so ridiculous.
It's quite amazing that she would even call you out on it and be that direct.
Yeah, be exactly that direct. And she actually argued inside the changing room and outside the changing room. She called a staff and something like that.
How embarrassing.
Yeah, it's embarrassing. And then like we were asking her the same question. I was asking her the same question again. So that how do you consider, what are the criteria of being a womanly chest, womanly breast? And then I look at her breast, which is a very small size. And then she was like, she realized I look at her and she looked at me and then she'd say nothing. And then,
so she got the point.
Yeah, she got the point, right? So it's not how big.
Yeah, it's not how big your boobs are. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So you would often encounter like things like that. Or people don't believe in you. And then especially because of my muscularity.
Yes.
Yeah.
What pronouns do you use then?
It depends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it depends. A lot of times for convenience, I would use he because I'm socially male. But it also depends on context. If I am speaking as a female bodybuilder, for example, I would use she. And sometimes people would actually ask me if I want to use they as a more like gender neutral pronoun. In English, I would say I'm okay with it as long as you want. I don't have a preference. But I have encountered cases like when I do Cantonese or Chinese media reportage, the reporter would tell me that, using they is very confusing to their audience. Because in Cantonese, it would be the same as English. It would be a plural, right? And it would be very confusing. They think that it would be very confusing to their audience. So a lot of times they would say, no, we don't prefer you to use they, but you can pick either he or she.
You just depends on which sort of angle you're coming from in the report.
Exactly.
Okay.
Most of the times I use he. Yeah, but sometimes I also use she. And sometimes, the reporter will just change it on their own. So
he and she.
Sometimes he, sometimes she.
Yeah.
Yes, I think for me, I don't really mind.
You're okay with
I'm
it?
okay with whatever.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can somebody change their gender legally in Hong Kong?
Yes, but currently you have to undergo the public hospital system. So basically you have to see a psychiatrist in Hong Kong and then you have to go through this normal process of around 2 years of assessment by the psychiatrist and to diagnose you with gender dysphoria. And then afterwards, because you are within the public hospital system, if you want surgeries, they will actually arrange for you for the surgeons and stuff. And if you want hormones, they will also arrange that for you. If you don't want anything, they will also, they will do nothing for you. But then they can diagnose you with gender dysphoria. And in Hong Kong, if you want to change your gender legally, there are differences. So if you are biologically assigned as female and then you want to be a man, you have to undergo the sterilization. That means you have to take out your uterus and your ovaries. This is the first must-do surgery. The second surgery would be a surgery that they call constructing some sort of a penis surgery. Right. So the bottom surgery, that's what they call. Basically, it has different kinds of, some people would actually make something like a penis. Some of them will just make the clitoris bigger and whatever. So some will just do a vaginal closure surgery. So it depends. So as long as you have done some surgeries, then the doctors will actually sign you a paper and then you can legally change your documents.
Oh,
so if you are a
I
male,
didn't know that. I thought you couldn't change your gender in Hong Kong, but you can if you go through all of these steps.
Yes.
Okay, great to know.
yeah, if you're a male and then you want to be a female, you just need to reconstruct your penis into a vagina. So this is the only surgeries that you need to do. But for like from female to male, because I know a lot of female to male friends who do not or cannot change the gender because they don't want or they do not want to do the bottom surgeries, basically.
Right.
Because like to a lot of them, it's quite invasive, it's invisible. So they would prefer like doing a chest surgery to remove the breast, which is not a requirement to legally change your gender. But most of the people, if they want to do surgeries, they will take away their breasts.
Right, that's so interesting. And in many other countries around the world, you can just legally change gender regardless of the surgery. You don't have to have the surgery. Isn't that true? So this is a little bit sort of backwards. Yeah, that's, I was trying to think of another word, but it is. It's a bit backwards, isn't it, here?
Yes, exactly. Since last year, we were actually discussing about a gender recognition law in Hong Kong. Because right now, for transgender people, even though they have changed their gender legally, a lot of their rights are not protected. And sometimes, we don't have equal rights as cisgender people or people who do not change their gender legally.
Can you give me an example of what sort of rights you don't have?
For example, like marriage rights, it was until 2013 with a case called Miss W, a transsexual woman who has done surgeries from male to female, and then she wanted to marry her boyfriend. And that would be on paper, a heterosexual marriage. But because in Hong Kong, according to our marriage ordinance, you have to marry according to your birth certificate, in which we can change a legal gender on our ID card, but not on our birth certificate. So on paper, on the birth certificate, it's a two male. So they cannot get married.
Yes, because gay marriage is illegal in Hong Kong.
Yes, it's illegal. So that's why they have Miss W actually went into the court case. And then in the Supreme Court, she won the case in 2013. So transgender people are given, equal marriage right as anyone else if you want a heterosexual marriage according to your gender identity. So this is only one of those rights. And I believe there are a lot of things when it comes up on paper, on administrative level. So right now we have another case by one of our transgender activists. He is a female to male. So he has already, as you said, a lot of countries doesn't require all the surgeries in order to legally change one's gender. So when he was in Britain, he has already changed his gender to male legally. But when he came back to Hong Kong, because he didn't do the bottom surgery, so basically he cannot legally change his gender to male. So he was filing a court case as well, and we were still waiting for the results of it.
So that could be quite groundbreaking if he wins.
Yeah, if he wins. At the same time, we're also discussing the gender recognition law in Hong Kong to have it really to, for example, you include, because there are some concerns. For example, like I've known a lot of friends, they want to do surgeries, they want to have hormones, but their body cannot take it. So because of the medical condition, they cannot do all these surgeries and stuff, although they are being diagnosed with gender dysphoria. So there are people that they had no way out.
They're transgender, they fully identify, but they can't have the surgery for medical reasons, but then they're not allowed to change gender, which is not fair.
Yeah, which is not fair, and which is, to them, a lot of times we always forget them because we only remember those who have done surgeries and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it is very important within our gender recognition law. One of the requirements is not requiring full surgery, right, in order to change your legal gender. So it's aligned with a lot of other countries who doesn't need surgical alternations.
You're obviously an LGBTQIA plus activist in Hong Kong.
I would say I'm more like an advocate than an activist.
Okay.
Yeah, because I am not always at the front line. Mm-hmm. Because as I said, I come from an educational family. I myself teach in the university. I'm a teaching assistant in the University of Hong Kong. So I'm more on this education side. So a lot of times I do a lot of advocacy work more than, activism.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So are you teaching in gender studies or anything in that area?
Yeah, I'm teaching in that area. So I'm teaching in the Department of Comparative Literature. So within one of the disciplines, it would be on gender and sexuality. So so that is something that I'm more familiar with. And I'm happy to explore that with my students.
Awesome. So Suifung, when you are competing as a bodybuilder, do you have to compete in the female competition? Could you choose to compete in the male competition, or do you not have a choice?
Basically, in a lot of sports, you have to compete according to your biological gender. Right now in bodybuilding, you still have to compete according to your biologically born gender or biologically assigned gender. Of course, there are some exceptions, but most of the time, yeah. So it makes sense. So I compete in the female category as a female bodybuilder, and I'm happy with competing as a female. But, well, there might be a possibility that I can compete in the men's, right? Maybe later.
Have you competed outside of Asia?
Yeah, I competed outside of Asia. I've done 4 competitions so far. So 2 of them are in Asia and 2 of them outside Asia.
I guess I'm imagining that if you wanted to go to the US as a transgender man, you could compete with the men there. Or does the US or Australia still have laws that you've got to be in your biological gender?
It's still a very sensitive topic within the bodybuilding culture on transgender gender issues. Right now, as far as I know, if you are legally change your gender into men's, if you're assigned female and then you legally change as a man, you can actually compete in men's category. But vice versa is still very controversial.
Men coming into the women's category.
Exactly.
And is that because they naturally have more muscle mass and so then they're at an advantage?
There's always this assumption.
Yeah. Is that an assumption? Is it not true?
Well, we all know that, genetic makeup, it varies.
Yes.
Right? A lot of people would say that if you're biologically man, even though you transition to female and then compete in the female category, still get this genetic advantage. But I would say, genetic advantage is just one of the comparative advantage in sports. So, a lot of people, they're genetically given. So you never really count that as one of those, advantages.
Well, the top athletes usually are genetically gifted, aren't they? No matter what their gender.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of times when you talk about this genetics and stuff, ignore other comparative advantage. For example, if someone have more resources, they have more money, they can hire a good coach or training, better food, whatsoever, or better supplements, whatsoever. So these are also other comparative advantage that we seldom talk about. We only focus on one of those, right? And that is not necessary, right? Even so, it's just one of them, one of the advantage.
That makes complete sense. So we really need to sort of get people thinking on a more broader scale rather than just focusing in one area.
Yes, exactly. But a lot of people, like even within the bodybuilding world, people are not very used to that kind of discussion. So I think we really need more of this kind of discussion.
That's why it's great we're talking about it now.
Yeah, exactly.
That's excellent. Do you face judgment or criticism or bias towards you as a female bodybuilding because you present in a more masculine way or not really?
I mean, in terms of competitions, you don't really, because like every one of us will...
Everybody is muscly and muscular,
yeah, exactly.
So it's probably sort of normal in bodybuilding.
Of course, like in female category, we also have different categories within the female bodybuilding. So it ranges from less muscular to most muscular. So the less muscular categories would be what we call bikinis or figures. And then the more muscular category of women would be, they call it physique or bodybuilding.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't
so
know
there are
that.
different subcategories.
So you can go in the more muscly category and be among people that are similar to you.
Yes, exactly. So I have been competing in the female bodybuilding category. So the most muscular within the women's category. Even for men, we have like degree of muscularity as well.
That's so interesting.
So you can actually compete according to your physique and stuff, and according to your interest or passion as well. So for me, I compete in the female bodybuilding category, really the bodybuilding category. So it's the most muscular. Women from the United States or from the West, more usually much bigger than me.
Oh, are they?
Yes,
wow.
Yes, a lot of them. I mean, the top athletes, a lot of them, they are much bigger because they're much taller. Yes. They have a bigger, musculature. Bigger frame.
In bodybuilding, I don't know a lot about it, but is it actually just where you present your body and you flex your muscles and you're judged on your musculature? Is that what it is? There's no lifting or weightlifting or anything like that involved, is there?
It's more like a visual aesthetic kind of sport. So in our competition, usually we have like several rounds, several kinds of it. The first one, we will be doing some mandatory poses. So all these poses will be the same for everyone within the same category. So if you are competing in the female bodybuilding, then you have a set of mandatory poses. Everyone will be doing the same thing. someone would call the name of, for example, front double bicep. So everyone would be flexing their arms.
Okay.
Yeah, showing the biceps, double biceps. Yeah. And there are some standards within the mandatory poses. So this is the first. The second would be, they would call it free posing or posing routine. So you pick your own music. Usually it ranges from 1 minute to 2.5. It depends on the competition. And then you will be posing freely. So, according to your own choice. So you can do some dancing whatsoever and together with the posing, or you can just flex and pose and you can pick your own music. Yeah. So this is the second. Yeah. So this is the second round. So it's more like an entertainment as well. The third round would be, they call it pose down. So pose down is a group of competitors. They would be like competing. Usually it's 1 to 2 minutes. So they would be 30 seconds to 1.5 minutes. So it depends. So every woman or every competitor would actually pose and they compete.
At the same time, they're competing together.
Yeah, competing with one another. And that's what we call the pose down.
And then will you have a table of judges that would rate you on each of your events? Have you had any success or any wins in your endeavors so far?
In my first competition in 2015, I won the champion in my category.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah,
That's
thank
great.
you. And a year later in 2016, I competed in Hong Kong and I get 4th. And the last year in Chicago, I get 2nd in my class.
Cool.
And this year I got 1st in Vancouver. And I turned from an amateur bodybuilder to a professional bodybuilder.
What qualifies you as professional? The titles?
Yes, you have to be the overall winner of your category. Yeah, and in order to get that professional status.
Oh my gosh. And so what do you have to do to be a professional bodybuilder? I guess you've got to think about diet. You've got to think about, you have to go to the gym. You have to be physically fit and you have to put a lot of time and effort into it, I imagine.
Yes, I actually train 6 times a week, 2 to 3 hours in the gym every day.
Wow. And is it weightlifting mostly?
Yes, mostly. For me, mostly weightlifting. But like towards for the contest, what we had different periods during the year. So now I would say after competition, you would say will be the off season. So basically, you focus on bulking up. So getting more like shape and size, muscle size as well. So basically you eat a lot and then you train heavier. And most of my training routines would be weightlifting more. But then during contest prep, so it's usually like 3 to 4 months before the contest, we'll be also adding a lot of cardio section as well. So alongside with the weight training. During that time, you will get more striated. Your muscles will be more striated and also more what we call dry. So it's more visible. And you will also lose weight at that time in order to get a better sense of the whole body.
Yeah, the definition of all your muscles in your body. And if you go in tighter down at the waist and stuff. And by getting the dry, striated muscles, then they stand out more when you're doing the actual poses.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, how cool. Are there many bodybuilders in Hong Kong?
It depends what you're asking about. So if you're talking about the female bodybuilding category, we have a few female bodybuilders in Hong Kong, but they are mostly not competing anymore. So I think in terms of bodybuilding, I'm one of those few who are still competing. I mean, we are younger generation, so a lot of them are in the 30s, 40s. So we have a few younger ones, but still like within 5.
Oh, okay. That's all.
Yeah.
Is there a sort of an age limit on bodybuilding or can you do it quite old?
You can do it. I think recently, not recently, but a few, maybe half year ago. So there was actually a worldwide news. A woman in her 70s was actually competing in
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, a lot of competitions, they actually have masters categories. Masters are usually 40 or above.
Oh, okay.
So in some competitions, they only feature all the masters. So they have really like defined, detailed age categories. So up to 60s, 70s. Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. So you've got to balance your work at the university and your training for bodybuilding, and being professional is going to take more time, isn't it?
I would say it takes more challenge because I have to improve some of my weaker parts. So in order to be on a whole different level of like competitors.
What sort of psychological or personality characteristics do you need to be a professional bodybuilder?
First of all, you have to be very disciplined, especially in Hong Kong. You have so many distractions about food.
Yeah. So is there certain things you won't eat?
Yeah, of course, like an entertainment. So food for me, I mostly cook my own food. So I seldom eat outside because like either the food is too oily or the food doesn't have the protein requirement that I need. Most of the time I actually eat my own lunchbox.
Oh, that's interesting.
I feel like you have to be very disciplined if you want to be, not to say professional, but to say, if you want to be a bodybuilder, you have to be very disciplined. You have to go to the gym, consistently. And then a lot of times people would say it's quite boring because you're always training the same muscles, every week. And you have to get used to it. And then you have to be passionate about, seeing the changes, improvements. Maybe it's only very slight improvements in your physique. You also need to be very positive, especially in Hong Kong, where we do not really have I would say our fitness culture is not very popular. So a lot of people go to the gym, but mostly they take a selfie in the gym rather than, or they
just pretend they're working out.
Pretend they're working out, or they're just, they're enjoying the aircon, sometimes.
Or they're just trying to lose weight or something like that.
That kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Our fitness culture is not very established, I would say. It's not very popular and established. So you are spending a lot of time at the gym. You start to lose your social life as well. So I think you also need to be very positive. If you're a man, then it's still better. Because like if you're a man, you want to go to the gym, get more muscular. If you're a woman, if you want to be muscular, you will encounter so many negative voices saying that, women shouldn't be so big. You don't want to be a man.
Do you encounter this, or do people assume you're male? And so they don't say that?
A lot of times they assume. If people do not know me, they usually assume that I'm a man.
Yeah.
And if they know about me, sometimes they get scared. They don't talk to me anymore.
Like you might be dangerous.
Yeah, they find it intimidating. Some men would find it intimidating. You always encounter that kind of people. And some people would actually be very supportive. So, I mean, it's 50-50. It depends on those people's mentality, I think.
Yes, it does. And their open-mindedness, their level of education, their level of understanding about gender issues and that sort of thing.
Not only gender issues, right? So if you see a woman who is working so hard to be more muscular, to work on the muscles.
Yeah.
If you are someone who really like muscles itself, so
it's almost aesthetics.
Yes, aesthetics. And also I encounter a lot of like even men's bodybuilder because they know how hard it is to build muscles, right? In particular on women. So they will be very respectful to you because they respect all your hard work and discipline and stuff. And you have to really experience that before you know how to respect someone who is very determined and work hard on it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, that's cool. And so we've won the Gay Games bid in 2022. Were you a part of that bid? Were you involved in the team?
Yes, I was in the bidding team of the Gay Games Hong Kong 2022.
Congratulations. That's an amazing feat.
Yeah, it was a really, really good experience. I'm also the ambassador of the Gay Games Hong Kong as well. So in the earlier stage, I did a lot of times usually media reportage on promoting gay games and to let more, especially locals and people in the LGBT community to know about our bid. And also represent the team to go to Sydney for the very first presentation that we had because we did several presentations.
Yes.
So I didn't go for the last one because there were a lot of people going there already.
Yeah.
So on the first one, there were 5 of us. We actually went to Sydney and then we present our bid. And after that, we were selected as the top 3.
Yes. So you were against Guadalajara and was it Washington, D.C.?
Yes,
oh,
exactly.
Great. See, I remember from my interview with Dennis.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And will you have bodybuilding as a part of the Gay Games here in Hong Kong?
Yes, exactly. We will have it.
Oh, great. Will you be organising or will you be a part of that organising team for that?
I will be helping out for the organising.
And competing as well?
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah,
if my body was still...
Your body holds up for 4 more years.
Yeah,
if you can keep cooking for yourself for 4 more years, you'll do it.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's exciting. And how do you think having the Gay Games in Hong Kong will impact Asia and Hong Kong?
I'm very positive and optimistic towards having gay games in Hong Kong. First of all, it's the first Asian city that apply and that go for the bid and won the bid. Even within the LGBT community, when we talk about LGBT issues, we'll seldom touch on sports. So we touch on all the other aspects, discrimination, all these different other aspects, but seldom on sports. And I feel like sports is, at least for me, is a very positive way to bring in people to understand diversity and inclusion. Because also about direct experiencing with someone who is different from you. A lot of people would misunderstand that gay games is only for gay people and LGBTI people, but it's more than that.
It's not, is it? It's open to anyone who wants to compete,
exactly.
And it's about inclusion.
one of the primary purpose is to let a non-homosexual or non-LGBTI people to actually have this direct experience with LGBTI people so that they will know that, we're just passionate too. Yeah. We're just different, but we are all very passionate towards sports.
Yeah. So it will bring everybody together in understanding and community and acceptance, and everybody will enjoy it through sport, which is lovely.
Yeah. I think this is the primary purpose, and also giving a safe space and place for LGBTI people to be themselves, to come out as who they are.
Yes, which is so important, because everybody should be able to live as themselves and be true to themselves, because life is too short to hide away, isn't it? Or feel like you don't fit in or that you're not normal, because everything is normal.
Yes, exactly.
Siufung, what advice would you give to a young person who's struggling with their own gender identity?
First of all, with the technology in the internet, it's much easier for you to search for people who are similar, or, search for resources, that you are struggling. So I would say, first of all, don't feel alone, because you're never alone. And if you think you are the weirdest, you can look at me. I'm still the weirdest.
You're not the weirdest. You're awesome.
Yeah. But a lot of times, if you feel depressed and stuff, it's because you feel that you're alone.
Yeah.
And always remember that you are never the worst person in the world.
You're never alone, and tomorrow can be a better day. And there's always somebody out there to offer you support.
Yes, exactly.
Did you deal with any mental health issues in your younger days when you were dealing with this stuff, or did you feel pretty sort of secure?
I used to have depression when I was younger.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually, during younger times, attempt suicide and stuff.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. Is that because of what you were going through and your struggles with your sexuality and your gender?
Yeah, with my struggles and sexuality, yeah. The struggles, yeah. And you always feel alone and feel repressed and stuff. But you will pass that. And when you hit the bottom, it's good, because if you hit the bottom already, then you can,
can just go up.
Just go up. Yeah. And when you go up, you never look back.
And I think it's about finding your community, isn't it? And finding other people that you can identify with and get support and reaching out for help.
And even though you cannot find anyone or any community that fits you in, just walk your own path. Just create one.
Yes.
Right? That's what I did.
That's awesome. What great advice. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's really good. That's what you did, isn't it?
That's what I do.
Because I guess you couldn't necessarily easily find a bodybuilding community or a genderqueer community in Hong Kong.
Yes, exactly. So I create one. So
good for you. There you go. That's such brilliant advice.
That's what my father told me as well. Because what he told me was that I have chosen a difficult path. But if you have chosen a path easy or difficult, you have to be responsible to walk until the end. And if there's not a path, just make one.
Yeah.
So that's
really lovely. I absolutely love that. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
If you could go back and talk to your teenage self, what would you say to that teenager?
Don't waste the time in crying, and don't waste the time in feeling depressed. Keep doing what you believe in. Yeah. When I was younger, I always thought I have this superpower. Yeah, in doing everything. So I had this, sometimes I have this mentality, and I feel like this is very important as well. So keep that up.
Believe in your superpower. Yeah. Find your superpower.
Yeah. And then the world will help you once you are very strongly believe in one thing. So for example, back in a few years ago, when I first started bodybuilding, I never thought I would be a professional. I think we have around 5 professionals in Hong Kong, men and women in Hong Kong. So I'm the 5th, I guess.
Oh, congratulations. That's amazing. It's such an achievement at your young age as well.
Yes, exactly. So going back, 4 years ago, I never thought that I would be a professional. It was like a dream far away. It's only for the Americans. That was how I think, right?
Oh, right. That's interesting. Yeah.
But of course, for Asians, there are much less Asians engaging in bodybuilding and be a professional. But then I strongly believe that I can be one of them. And sometimes you have to strongly believe in one thing, and the universe or whatever, the world will actually help you out with all these things.
That is so true.
That is how I become a professional.
Yeah. So now that you're a professional, what's your next dream in the future?
My nearest dream would be the world's first female bodybuilder. So every year we have one of those big competitions. If you get the champion of that, you're at the top of the top.
Oh, right. Yeah. Where is that held? In different places every year, is it?
No, they used to do it in Arizona. So,
okay.
Yeah, so it was usually in September, early
cool.
September.
Oh, good luck with that. And finally, if you were an animal, what would you be?
I love this question. So this question, I actually thought about that for a long time.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, but I actually did some fun facts as well.
Oh, did
fun
you?
fact searching.
Oh, did you? Cool.
Recently, I'm quite obsessed with gorillas.
Oh, great.
Yeah, the silverback gorillas.
They're beautiful, aren't they? They're gorgeous and they're so
they're endangered species.
And they're so human-like in their emotions and the way they interact as a community.
Yeah, first of all, in terms of their musculature, so the physique, it's very muscular and very beast-like. It resembles my own dream of my physique and stuff. They're very strong. At the same time, they're very gentle and very intelligent in terms of animals. So yeah, I've actually done research on that. So.
Oh, thank you so much. I was so wondering what you'd come up with, and that's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, that is something. I mean, it also tells a lot about my own personality. That they're very shy as well. It's very interesting. I don't think I'm very shy, but in my younger teenage time, I have been a very shy person.
Sure.
When I talk, I blush.
Oh, how cute.
Yeah, now
you're coming out of your shell. More confident.
More confident. But
that's awesome.
But still, sometimes I would blush. But yeah, I feel like, this gorilla actually resembles a lot of my personality.
Fantastic. And if you had a superpower, what would it be?
I would want to have this ability to heal people.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, to heal people not only in terms of physical sense.
Yes, but emotional. Well, I think that's what you have done today. I think anybody out there who is struggling with gender or sexuality will feel not alone and will feel healed in some way. And I'll leave some information for people on how they can get help or support if they need it in the blurb for this podcast.
Yes, or at least get some inspiration.
Yeah, get some inspiration. Exactly. Find something that you are passionate about and get inspired. Suifung, thank you so much for meeting me today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I've really just absolutely loved talking to you. I don't want to stop, actually. I just want to keep going. But thank you for meeting with me, and thank you for being so open and sharing so much about your personal experience and your personal life. And I think that it's going to be really, really healing and helpful and inspirational to all of my listeners all over the world. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.